you can lose fat and build a substantial amount of muscle in your 30s. I'm going to be 35 in a couple of weeks, and I look better than I ever did in my 20s. In my 20s, I kind of wasted it a little bit. I didn't really understand all the components that needed to fit together to get into really good shape. Today, I'm going to break it down for you exactly what I changed when I got into my 30s to get to the strongest that I've ever been. I just had a 300-pound bench press last week. Never hit that in my 20s. Let me show you how I've done that and gotten to the lowest body fat percentage that I've ever been. Good morning. Welcome to week 18, day 2. Still going to be a heavy pull day, but if you watched the video yesterday, you know that we are changing up our training routine slightly this week. We're 2 weeks out from the powerlifting meet. So our heavy pull today is more of a competition prep, meaning we're doing heavy singles for our top set, and then we're doing a back off set. So I will be doing a ramp up, a warm up, and then ramping up to my deadlift at 90%. So that'll be 350 for me. And then we'll do 2 sets of 3 at like 80% or so. After that, we will do some weighted pull-ups and some bent over barbell rows just for a little extra volume. Our overall volume will still be substantially lower than my normal push-pull legs routine. So to sum up, the philosophy this week is to get my central nervous system engaged in heavy single reps without dropping off volume significantly, but dropping out volume. So trying to prioritize not being fatigued. I want my muscles to not feel sore going into next week. So it's kind of like a deload, but it's a specialized type of deload where we're still doing a heavy single. And then next week we will have a couple of days of lifting. We'll do some rehearsal lifts for our opening weights on Monday and Tuesday. And then I will start a water cut on Wednesday through Friday, because the weigh-in is on Saturday. So that's where we are. Today, the topic we will talk about is building muscle, specifically in your 30s, but I also want to address how you can build muscle in your 20s. It's very similar in your 20s and 30s. There are only some slight differences, but I'll address it from my point of view, like coming from someone who floundered a bit in my 20s, not really understanding what I needed to do, and then locking in my 30s and getting into the best shape. And then I'll briefly touch on what I might need to change as I age. So in my 40s, 50s, 60s, what training will look like. For me, it'll be maintaining muscle, but we can also talk a little bit about what it would be for building muscle. So hopefully that'll be interesting to talk about. I think that there's a lot of misconceptions around building muscle, losing fat, bulking, cutting, types of exercises. So hopefully I can dispel some of the myths, and I'll address some of the myths that I believed, and some of the wrong thinking that I had about training and nutrition in my 20s, and why I never got to the level that I'm at today in my 20s when I probably could have earlier. But yeah, well, let's get set up for deadlift, and then we will continue talking about that. For the warm-up today, it'll be a little bit different than my normal 2 sets of 50%, 1 set of 75%. It'll be similar, but I'm just going to do more of a ramp-up. Start out with 135 here, and then we'll just add weight and drop the reps as we work our way up to 350, which is the single heavy that we will do. So 135 to start, just to get the bar moving, get our body moving, get the blood flowing. 10 of these.
Just a quick background for where I was coming from in my 20s into my 30s. I was a middle school, high school athlete. I did learn to do compound lifts pretty early on. That was part of our training, but that was going to be mostly in like the off season and stuff. And then in college, I did do I wasn't a super high level athlete, but I did do Division III track, and so there was some training involved in that. We did do off season weight training and then during the season is going to be mostly, sprinting, jumping, running. So I came out of college in my early 20s with a decent kind of like base. Like I did have some muscle. I did put on muscle during that time. I did get newbie gains. So I had a decent foundation, but in high school, I was really lean as well. And really what happened in my 20s was, I started eating more and working out less. And so I don't think I didn't necessarily like lose any more muscle, but I didn't necessarily build it as much as I could have. And I gained more weight than I wanted to. And that really just came from a wrong way of thinking about nutrition and the types of exercise that would lead to a lean physique. So I wanted to build muscle and lose fat, but probably the only thing that I accomplished was like gaining muscle and fat, but like gaining muscle at not as an efficient rate as I could have if I did it correct. And I'll talk about exactly what I mean by that in just a sec. Okay, second set, I just put on 10s. We're at 155. I'm still going to do 10 sets at 10 reps of this. Still just lightweight, moving the bar. It's usually the second warm-up set is where I start to feel like I'm opening up a little bit. Do have a little bit of tightness in my back today, my lower back. I will definitely be paying attention to that. Don't want to aggravate myself this close to the meet. All right. 225 loaded on the bar now, which has gone up. So we will probably shoot for, I don't know, see how we feel. 4 at the minimum, but probably maybe even 6 to 8. Haven't put on my belt yet. I'm going to wait till I get, after this set, probably I'll feel warm enough to take my hoodie off and get the belt on. All right, we're getting closer to my typical working weight, which is like 305 or so. That's usually 3 sets of 4 to 6. So I've got 275 on here. So I'm going to start ramping down. We're going to do 2 reps of this. And then we'll put on a little bit more weight and I'll start doing warm singles as we ramp up to 350. Let's see how this feels. too bad. But what are some of the myths that I believed when I was in my 20s that prevented me from getting the physique that I wanted? Now, let's level set there. The physique that I wanted was a muscular yet lean physique, right? And so there's two facts to that, right? You need to both build and grow muscle and strength, and then you also want to lose body fat and get lean. So I thought that to do that, you needed to focus on that. Like, basically, I thought CrossFit was the answer. Now, I don't want you to hear me say that I don't think that CrossFit is a great way to get in shape. That's not what I'm saying. I think it is a great exercise and it is great for your overall health. Like, I do think there are some factors to consider on whether it's the right thing, the right type of training for you. If your goal is to be lean and grow muscle, I think that the like Metcon type workout or like high intensity cardio with like weights and strength and kind of intertwined, it's not really the most optimal because of the recovery. And I do think it's easier to do in your 20s, right? You don't need as much recovery. So doing those super high intense types of workouts where you're just really just aiming to make yourself feel sore, you can recover pretty quickly from that. And I do think I did build some muscle during that time. So it wasn't all a waste. But I thought that by the more intense that I went, and that's not meaning like intense, like in a weight training session, that's like intense conditioning via like a Metcon or running, right? So I would run like 3, 5, 6, 10 miles or whatever. I thought that intensity of the cardio that you did was correlated to how much fat you would lose. So I was under the misunderstanding of the type of training that was needed. And then I didn't give enough credence to nutrition. I was just like I had a fast metabolism and I just took advantage of it. And I thought that I had a faster metabolism than I did because over that decade, I saw myself gain more weight. And yes, as I just said, some of that was muscle because I was training, but a lot of that was fat, a higher percentage was fat, probably because I wasn't prioritizing protein. I was eating regularly in a calorie surplus, wasn't tracking my food. I couldn't tell you, what my typical diet was, but it wasn't great. So between not really giving enough credence to nutrition, knowing whether I was in a surplus or a deficit and whether I was getting enough protein, and then not having the right type of training, that just led to let's just call it like an underwhelming physique in the 20s. Now, for some of you, that may lead to being skinny fat because you're not building muscle. Some of you, that may lead to probably what I had, where you just have a layer of fat on top of an like okay base. And the reason I give a lot of credit to my training in high school and college because that is where I was doing most of my compound lifts and resistance training. And I think you don't really start losing muscle until your 30s. FYI, a little tip for you. You start losing muscle, I forget, it's like a certain number of percentage points per year or per decade or whatever, once you turn 30, if you're not actively resistance training. So even in your 20s, it's incredible. You can go without really, like, as long as you're eating enough food, you won't really lose muscle in your 20s that much, even if you're not training the correct way. So, I kind of think I'm lucky in the fact that the time that I didn't really know much about training and how it all worked was the time when I could kind of get away with it without losing muscle. So that was kind of a stroke of luck. But yeah, it all clicked for me when I got into my 30s. For me, my 30s happened around COVID. I turned 31 in that time, and that also led to a period of less training than normal, more eating than normal, and so that rate of fat gain increased. and it became very noticeable. It was the heaviest I'd ever been. I think it was like 210 or 215, and not like 210 like I was at the start of this cut where I was still pretty muscular. It was like if I find pictures, I'll show you, but it was like 210 in 2021 looked a lot different than 210 in 2025 when I started this. Trust me. So yeah, but I started researching how to get a superhero physique, quote unquote. And that's when I realized what how I had been thinking wrongly about how much conditioning plays into fat loss. And really, I need to like go apologize to my mom, because at one point she was talking about starting to do weight training herself. And I was like, yeah, well, you're not really going to lose the weight if you're not doing, heavy conditioning like CrossFit or like jogging. And I literally said that, and I couldn't have been more wrong. So let's talk more about what the shift was and what the change I implemented looked like. I do want to emphasize too that I wasn't doing everything wrong. Like, things could have been worse, right? Like I could have been completely sedentary and just gaining fat at a higher rate. There were certainly times when in CrossFit, most CrossFit gyms, you still do some compound lifts to help build strength. So there is a little bit of that in there, but you're mostly working on those like conditioning type workouts, because the sport is helping you get into shape and condition to do other sports. That's how it was born. And so it's just a lot of conditioning is a huge part of it. And that's just for most of us who are not like quote athletes doing a sport, like we just don't need that level of conditioning. We want to grow muscle and lose fat, right? And you want to lower your blood pressure. You want to have good cardiovascular health as well, but that is not the foundation. The conditioning is not the foundation. Strength training is. So I do want to say that like those weren't completely lost years. And if you are doing CrossFit, I think it's great. If you're doing something like High Rocks, I think that's great. If that's something that you really enjoy and it's helping you reach the goals that you want to do, I'm not here to convince you not to stop doing that. I'm more trying to convince people who are looking at all the different types of exercises and workouts and programs and training things out there right now. And they're trying to figure out, how do I reach the goal of having muscle yet being lean? And so I'm wanting to try to dispel the myth that you need to do this conditioning route to get there. I want to propose a simple solution that is based on weight training, nutrition, and recovery. All right, let's get this. What is this? 305. We're going to do this once. So what exactly should I have been doing in my 20s? What would I go back and do? Well, I had a foundation of compound lifting from high school and college, so I would recommend to myself, go back to that. I would say, do something like the 5x5 workout, where it's only compound lifts, 3 days a week. Start there. Or if that, is a little too, quote, vanilla for you, just do a simple push-pull legs. Just do 3 days a week. Focus on bench, squat, and deadlift, and then a few other accessory lifts. Let that be if you do nothing else for training, do that. If you still want to do some cardio, focus on the things that you love. I was a sprinter and a jumper in track. So do those things, like do sprint workouts. Those are great for cardio. They're great for training. They complement nicely compound lifting. Now, I would say don't do it too often. Make sure it doesn't interfere with your compound lifts, right? And then also I would say prioritize low intensity cardio. If you want cardio, walk, just take a daily walk, right? So compound lifts as your foundation. If you do nothing else, do that. If you're going to do cardio, walk, or do like high intensity or sprint interval training just like once or twice a week. That's all you need. I would say don't don't worry about, I would say for my goals at that time, I would say ditch the jogging because I didn't love it. I'm not a huge long distance runner in the first place. I never really enjoyed it. It was something I thought I had to do. So I would free myself of that burden. And I would say also, you don't have to do, I was never really great at CrossFit, right? And so that could also play into why I never really, like, it always felt like something I had to do. It felt like, well, you need to get better at this. You're not good at, if you were just better at this, if you trained harder, then you would also look better. And it's really, they're not the same. The two things are not the same. So you may look at me and say like, well, you're just saying not to do those things because you weren't great at that. And I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong, right? We as humans are going to be biased to like the things and do the things that we're good at. So if you are good at those things and you enjoy them, by all means, keep doing them. What I do want it to do is free you from the burden of thinking that that is the way to get into the best shape of your life. It's not necessarily the way, and certainly not the only way. And what research shows, if you want to build muscle and lose fat, the best way, the most efficient way to do that is to prioritize resistance training with progressive overload, right? Prioritize rest and recovery. Make sure you're programming recovery days and that you're getting plenty of sleep. And then the third thing that I didn't do at all in my 20s, and I kind of wish I would have jumped on this a little sooner. I could have gone into my 30s even better, with an even better head start. And that's nutrition, right? That is eating in a slight calorie deficit while prioritizing a high amount of protein in your diet. That is a surefire way to build muscle and lose fat when you're in your 20s. Your body is geared to do that. You recover well when you're in your 20s and you're a male. Your testosterone is the highest it's ever going to be. So you are built for body recomposition. All you need is a slight deficit to lose fat and gain muscle. Now that you can still do that in your 30s. It's just the pace at which you can do it, the ability at which your body can do it might not be as much as what it was in your 20s. You can still start from scratch in your 30s and benefit from newbie gains and certainly lose fat and gain muscle at the same time. If you're a little bit more trained like I was, your first goal is just going to be to lose body fat and maintain muscle. And then you can kind of cycle if you want to, go on a phase or a cycle of building muscle, then be okay with gaining a little bit of fat. But I think for most of us, when we get into our 30s, the first thing that we need to do is lose fat because we probably didn't do that well in our 20s. Most of us, I don't know. I think I'm just speaking broadly and average. I don't really. I can say that confidently, just knowing that in America specifically, we struggle with obesity and overeating. That's like the bulk problem. That's one of the biggest problems. So we tend not to. It's even if you have muscle, you tend to have more fat than you want. And then if you're skinny fat, you have more fat than you want. For me, the easiest thing to do is to start losing the fat. So, all right. What I was trying to say there is what I should have been doing in my 20s is prioritizing compound lifts with progressive overload, prioritizing rest and recovery, prioritizing and paying attention to nutrition. Find out what my calorie maintenance was at that time and eat in a slight deficit. Maybe like 200 or 300 calorie deficit is all it would have taken to if you do that over a decade, you might, first of all, you don't need to do it over a decade, but if you just do it over a couple of years, you're going to lose a bunch of fat and potentially in your 20s, gain muscle as well. Last thing I'll say about working out in your 20s is the gains that you make. As I said earlier, you don't like lose any muscle in your 20s hardly. That doesn't start happening until your 30s and 40s if you're not resistance training. And so that is just like easy wins for you to take. So I was lucky that I did, I ate in a surplus for the most part, and I did do some training. I did have some foundation going in. So that was muscle that I got to take with me into my 30s. So when I started losing weight, it was mostly fat coming off and there was still some muscle underneath. So any muscle that you gain in your 20s it just a free head start in your 30s. You get to, and it's easy, once you have muscle, it's easier to maintain it than it is to build muscle. I'm going to say that again. It is far easier to maintain muscle than it is to build it. Building muscle is slow. We're talking like at the best, like a half pound of muscle per week or something like that. That might even be generous, but I'd have to go and look at, I forget the exact numbers, but yes. Now to maintain that muscle, all you have to do is eat enough calories and get enough protein, resistance train a little bit. That's it. All right, one more stop on our way to 350. This is 325. We'll just do this once. So if you are in your 20s right now, don't make my mistake. Don't think that you have to prioritize cardio. In fact, I will say don't prioritize cardio if your goal is to build muscle and lose fat. Prioritize compound lifts and progressive overload. Prioritize protein in your diet. I highly, highly recommend tracking your food. It's super easy to do once you get used to it. Just get an app like I have. You just enter in your food. Most food that you get at the store, you can scan it on a barcode. When you make a recipe at home, you just put it all together, weigh it. Most restaurants like Chipotle and stuff have their macronutrients available. Build as much muscle as you can right now in your 20s, because it is never as easy to do as it is today, right now. It can be done. In fact, here's a crazy statistic. You can build muscle into your 80s. They have research showing men in their 60s to 80s and show significant muscle growth with it. They have research that shows significant muscle growth in men in their 60s through 80s. So you can build muscle. It's just not going to be at the same rate that you can do in your 20s. So prioritize it now because you get to take it with you. It's easier to maintain it once you have it. And your physique ceiling is probably higher than you think, right? Your ability to build muscle. You might think, I thought that I was pretty muscular when I was in high school, and it's laughable now, right? It is just absolutely laughable. You can put on more muscle than you think naturally too, as well. And when you're in your 20s, you've got time ahead of you. You've got a decade before your 30s. Most men don't peak as far as strength and muscle size until their 30s or early 40s anyway. But that only happens if you kind of start early. And the thing that will help you get there is consistency. Just imagine if you're, 23 right now or something like that. What would happen if you were just consistent for the next 7 years? You'd go into your 30s looking far better than I do, right? And then you just get to take that with you, right? As long as you just do a little bit of maintenance for the next few decades. So that's what I would say to you if you're in your 20s. If you're in your 30s, I would say do not despair, especially if you did not optimize your 20s as best as you could. You can still get there. You can still get a great physique. You can still get strong. You can still be healthy and fit. Your muscle building potential is virtually the same in your 30s as it was in the 20s. It just, your recovery might be a little bit slower. Your metabolism might not be quite as fast. So you might have to, for me personally, managing fat is a little bit more difficult than it was then. And then you might have more stress in your life that you have to manage. And stress can be a big inhibitor to gains. But yeah, let's talk a little bit more about what the shift for me looked like in my 30s and what are some things that, I do differently as a 35-year-old than I would as a 25-year-old. All right, I was surprised by how heavy 325 felt. I do have a little bit of muscle soreness. I think must just be from Romanian deadlifts last week. So I'm going to do one more here at 355. It's just easier to do 355 than 350. And then we'll see how that goes, and then what my back off sets look like, because I might change it up. Because I think I'm just feeling a little bit more fatigued than I thought I was going to be, and I want to pay attention to that. All right. For my back off sets, I'm going to go back down to 305 rather than 320. I'm going to do 2 sets of 3, or maybe 2 sets of 2. That I definitely felt that straining, and I could feel the soreness on that 355. Good news is, it was still like very doable. So I think that's a good sign for that'll probably be like my opening weight at the meet. But I don't want to overdo it. Again, this is supposed to be a kind of almost like a deload week. So I want to pay attention to that, make sure I'm not making myself more tired than I need to. So what did I change? What did I start doing in my 30s that helped me get into the best shape that I've been in? It's the same things that I just said in the 20s, right? It is prioritizing resistance training with a foundation of compound lifts, right? So I do mainly the foundation of my lifting is bench press, deadlift, and squats. I like a push-pull legs split because it allows me to also, since I would say I'm an intermediate lifter, I can fill in weaknesses with accessory work or unilateral work. And I like to do that with the rest of that, push day. So I start out with bench, and then I'll do triceps and shoulders and other stuff. I think the biggest shift for me, I was familiar with weight training. For me, the biggest shift was food. Was coming to terms with the fact that tracking my food was actually going to free me up. I thought it was going to be a burden. I thought it was going to be this really difficult thing to do. I thought it was absurd, but it's kind of like a food budget, kind of like you would have a money budget. People will say oh, I can't have a budget. I like to just, it feels too restrictive. But if you frame it maybe you've heard this analogy for a budget before, like a schoolyard, right? That's up against a road. When the kids go out for recess, there's a fence there. And that fence allows the kids to go all the way up to that boundary safely. Whereas before, it might have been harder to know where that boundary was. They might have crossed that. They might have gone into danger, right? So you put up a boundary to allow you to experience the full area of enjoyment, right? Another way to think about it is it allows you to focus on your goals and not have distractions. So with money, instead of spending money on something spur of the moment and then later thinking, man, I wish I would have saved enough money to buy this other thing, a budget helps you focus on the things that you actually want and not being distracted by things on the way. Same thing with a food budget. If you have a specific goal, man, I really want to start losing weight, but you have to know how much food and what kinds of food are going to help you get there. And so it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy food. It just means it helps you make decisions about what to enjoy and then when to bite down and lock in. So you can have a cake, right? You can have a cookie as long as it fits into your plan. Maybe a cookie is going to put you over your calories for the day, and you make a decision, you know what, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that for today. Tomorrow I'm going to get cracked down. Or maybe you say, I'm going to have this cookie, and that means I'm going to have to not have this other meal or not have this other food later because I want to stay under my calories for the day. But it helps you reach your goal. right? You have a plan that helps you reach a goal. So, wow, I spent a lot of time talking about that, more than I anticipated. Compound lifts, resistance training, progressive overload, nutrition, prioritize your calories, and prioritize protein, right? I thought that I got a lot of protein when I was in my 20s. I couldn't tell you though, actually, how much protein I got. What I can tell you is when I started tracking my protein, I was shocked at how much intentionality it takes to get 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, right? So if you weigh 200 pounds, to get 200 grams of protein is pretty difficult, especially if you're managing your total calories. Now, yes, you can get 200 grams of protein with 6,000 calories easily. Getting 200 grams of protein with 2,000 calories is a much different thing. It's much more difficult. So, and then, the last thing that I shifted, and I didn't really have to shift it too much because by the time I got to my 30s, I was already kind of prioritizing sleep. I just knew that I needed that. But sleep and recovery and rest is very, 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 very important. In my 20s, I didn't do that very well, especially in college. I would go back and tell myself, you need to prioritize this more if this is a goal for you to look good and feel good. But I think by the time I got to my 30s, that just kind of had naturally happened. I just knew if I'm going to get up with my kids, I've got to get sleep. I've got to get sleep. My body just needs sleep. And so that was an easy shift because it wasn't really a shift for me. But if I realized for a lot of people, it may be trying to get 6 to 8 hours is a big shift. And it is a hugely important one because that is when muscle building actually happens, right? Progressive overload will push adaptation. It will break down your muscles, but they won't grow if you're not resting and recovering. And another part of that is stress. And I would say that was one of the biggest things in my 30s to overcome was stress. I've done a lot of work on mental health. I see a counselor. I've worked through depression and anxiety. I don't want to. I'm not trying to say woe is me and my life is so difficult and hard, but I think there is a shared kind of consensus of being being a husband, a father, a provider for your family and the burden of that, the anxieties of the market at large, making sure you have enough money for retirement. That can weigh on a person, right? Am I going to be fired today? I don't know. There's all these mass layoffs. That can be really hard for someone. And so mental health plays in a big factor and being stressed out will kill your gains more than anything, I think. More than a lot of things when you're in your 30s, because I think that's when the burden and stress of life, maybe it's accumulated and, you can start having adverse effects and of accumulation of trauma and stress and anxiety in your 30s. So that's something to pay attention to as well. I haven't really addressed that too much in the past, but I don't want to understate it, how important it is to manage stress and have good mental health. And that will allow you to have good physical health as well. All right, now our back off sets. I've gone down to 305. I decided to go down to 305 rather than 325. And we're just going to do 2 sets of 3 at this, as long as this first set feels good. So. Now, if you need proof that I'm in the best shape of my life, like I said earlier, I'm about to do a powerlifting meet for the first time in my life in a couple of weeks. And when I was finding my 1 rep max, I did 300 in bench, which is an all-time best for me, even from college days. Now, I did only get 375 in squat and 390 in deadlift. Those should be higher if they were going to match the same impressiveness as my bench. So that shows me that I do have areas of growth, and I think I can attribute a lot of that to, I think I probably did more bench pressing in my 20s than I did squats or deadlifts. and I think that those areas went on kind of neglected, and it's showing up now. So what I'm viewing it as is an area of potential for growth, because as we said earlier, like in your 30s, you can still grow muscle, you can still build strength, and those have been improving. I know I can say with confidence that my deadlift has gotten better in the past few years since I started focusing on it. And my back is a weaker point, and I've been programming my training to try and compensate for that, to try and grow my back strength and my posterior strength. I will say one thing, and if you're like me in your 30s, that you need to prioritize is maintaining health and avoiding injury. And for me, that's less about resistance training. Like I have gotten injured weight training far less than I have doing other things. And that's usually it comes in recreational sports, basketball, soccer, ultimate frisbee. For me, it's always, I have a chronic hamstring issue that started in high school. My hamstrings, once you pull your hamstring, you're like 200% more likely to pull it later again. So it takes a lot of dedication for me to try and focus on hamstring health. So I have, over the past few years, pulled both hamstrings at different times, and that interferes with my ability to do squats and deadlifts, right? So that's another reason why they probably haven't adapted and grown as much as my chest. But that's another thing to keep in mind. As you are in your 30s, you're just going to start becoming more susceptible to injuries, especially as you get later into your 40s. So that's something to think about, if you need to adapt your training to that, right? And not just adapting your training to avoid injury. So making sure that you're doing good form, safe lifts, think about rep ranges, but also preventing injury. So the types of workouts that I do are also geared towards strengthening my hamstrings, right? I prioritize doing Nordic curls and things like RDLs to strengthen my hamstrings, because I know that they're prone to injury. So I also want to do preventative maintenance on those as well. And that's something that I never did in my 20s, right? But preventative injury avoidance and maintenance makes its way into your training, I think, in your 30s, and certainly becomes more important in your 40s and your 50s and so forth. All right, last set of the day. Well, for our deadlifts, we're going to get another set of 3 here. All right. Get some weighted dips. I've just got 10 pounds on here. I've got 3 sets of 8 on here. We'll see. We'll see if I can get that. I don't know. I think that's what we've been doing, but I'm not gonna be super sad if I can't hit that, knowing that we're taking it a little easier this week. So briefly, let's touch on what changes in your training as you reach your 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. Similarly to 20s or 30s, recovery is one of the most impacted things, right? So you may notice that you start to need longer to recover. So maybe then, rather than going 5 and 6 days a week, you go down to more like 4 or 3 days a week. And you give yourself like a full 48 hours before you train a muscle group again. Starting at 3 days a week is a great place to start. And you don't need to be working out 5 days a week or 6 days a week at all. If you don't need to. You can be doing 3 days a week from the start. And so you might not have to adjust anything if that's what you've been doing in your 30s anyway. Another thing you want to explore is joint health. So exploring movements that are going to be easier on your joints. And this is when I would say that getting like a cable machine or a gym membership where you can use machines, those are going to be much easier on your joints. So start considering that in your 40s or 50s. It's going to be more important. I would say I would still focus on trying to, if you can, have your compound lifts be the foundation of your workout. But just, you might need to change the rep range rather than shooting for like the strength rep range of 4 to 6. Maybe you bump it up to like 10, 12, right? So you're using lighter weight. If you have a gym membership, or maybe you have, the funds to buy a Smith machine, you start doing those for bench and squat to take some of the stress off of like your back and your elbows. And then you can also focus on like maybe it's not an end all be all too. Like you don't have to only do machines and cables and stuff. You can change your workout. You should be shifting your routine every like few weeks anyway. So like right now, if I go anywhere from 8, 10 up to 12 weeks, usually I try to push it to 12 weeks on a certain routine, and then I deload and then I do a different routine. First of all, you may go shorter routines and prioritize deloads more. And then you definitely want to just be shifting it up. Like maybe one routine, you do the compound lifts with the barbell traditionally. But then on your next routine, you prioritize doing more joint-friendly variations. So like I already switch between dumbbell bench press and barbell bench press. One thing I could do is use a neutral grip. And that makes it just a little bit easier on your wrists, for example. So you can find things like that. You can do unilateral work. I do Bulgarian split squats already. That's just something, again, that you can build into your workout now and keep around later. And maybe you shift to that being your primary workout for your legs or something like that. So I don't want to advocate for abandoning compound work altogether. I've heard people say that, and I disagree with it. I do think you should try to keep it around if you can, unless you have like an injury. You can periodize and switch up your routines to give yourself a break from heavy compound lifts. And you can also increase the rep schemes so that you don't have to do as heavy weight, right? And it should be safer to do, right? Safer to do, 3 sets of 10 with 225 as a squat versus doing 3 sets of 4 at 300. Overall, the volume may be similar, right? But one is going to be way harder on your central nervous system and your joints than the other. Get our next set of pull-ups. Be sure to stick around to the end. I will do the daily check-in for today. An exciting update today. Our weight is getting a little bit better, but I do show you my weigh-in for the morning, every workout, and I show you what I ate the day before. I go through my calorie tracking app. You can see exactly what I ate for each meal, and we can see exactly what my calories and my protein were. And lately, I've also been tracking my carbs and sodium and water intake as I prepare to do a water cut next week. So I make sure to do this daily check-in every workout, because when I was first starting out, as I said, in my 30s, that's when I first started paying attention to nutrition. I had avoided it for a long time. I thought it was hard to do. And so what I want to show you is how easy it is, and what it might look like, and how the stakes aren't like, it's not the end if you miss a goal for your calories one day. If you're not hitting your protein exactly, I show you exactly how I'm doing, and I give you the range that's acceptable for me, and how I adapt for when I miss things. So I wish I would have had a buddy that could have shown me that when I first started, and so I try to provide that to you all. That will be at the end of the workout. We still have one more pull-up set to do, and then barbell rows. All right, last set of pull-ups. What I love about this, I'll call it a system for fitness, is that it scales, and that it is pretty much, it's like a cheat code for the rest of your life once you figure it out. The simple idea of using resistance training with progressive overload, managing your calories and protein, and getting rest and recovery works for every decade of your life. The changes that happen between decade to decade are small compared to thinking about having to change from you're not having to change from doing CrossFit to doing resistance training, or doing only body weight and yoga to doing this or that and that. The foundation stays the same, and then you can make slight changes to the training program as you go on. You'll certainly have to make changes to your diet as you go on. Your metabolism will change. It'll adapt. You'll have to eat more or less calories. It's more important to get more protein as you age. And sleep. Recovery becomes more important as you age. So if you prioritize it early on, if you start getting 6 to 8 hours of sleep now, it's going to be easier when you get older because you're used to getting that much. A fun fact, as you age, your circadian rhythm changes. Your circadian rhythm is what gives you your sense of what a day is. It controls what your natural sleep cycle is. So when you are young, your circadian rhythm is actually a little bit longer than a day. It's 25 hours. That's why there's that trope of teenagers sleeping in, because your body wants to. If it thinks that it needs another hour of sleep, it thinks the day is an hour longer than it is. As you age, your circadian rhythm finally lines up midlife, and then as you get older, it becomes less than a day. So that's why there's a stereotype of older people waking up very early, because again, you feel like the day is already up. It's time to wake up. So that's just a little fun fact. Doesn't really factor in too much, except that if you prioritize getting your sleep now, it's important, because when you age, when you get into your old age, it's going to be harder to keep yourself asleep. But at the same time, maybe you find other ways to rest and recover. So I don't know what to call that, just fun scientific fact of the day or something. The main point I wanted to make was how this system of nutrition and fitness and recovery just, for the large part, stays the same throughout your whole life, with only slight minor adjustments as needed. you get to take it with you. You learn it once and you get to take it with you for the rest of your life. And I think that's what's cool is you should be able to do some variation of what we're talking about in each decade of your life. You can't always do CrossFit. And I want to apologize to CrossFitters. I'm not trying to poke at CrossFit. I just do that because I know that's what I did in my 20s. And I wish that I would have known how important regular resistance and compound lifting was. But you can't take jogging with you, into your old age. That's something you can't take. You can't take binge eating. I mean, you can take it with you, but not healthily, right? Think about high performance athletes. There is a peak, right? And then they can't perform at the same level. What's really cool about just being in good physical fitness is you don't have to be at the peak, right? You just have to be, you just have to do the things like progressive overload. It doesn't mean that you're going to be the strongest you've ever been in your 60s. It does mean that you can be the strongest version of yourself as a 60-year-old once you get there. It's different, right? We're not saying different things or the same thing or whatever. I'm not saying you're going to be at your peak all throughout your life. I'm going to say you're going to be your peak version of yourself for that decade of yourself. And so I'm going to leave the workout there for the day. I'm feeling like I got a good stimulus. I'm running a little over time. Barbell rows sound great, but they also sound like something I don't need to do this week since I'm trying to kind of deload. So we're going to end the workout there, but I want to leave you with a couple of things as we close here. Let's see what. Well, actually, I want to pose some questions to you. So, what did your training look like in your 20s? If you're now older than that, or if you're in your 20s, what are you currently doing? What works for you? What worked for you, and what doesn't? Or what didn't? Are you like me, and you're in your 30s, and you're just now figuring it out? And what does that look like for you? Or are you in your 30s and you're trying to figure it out? Let me know in the comments, and would love to chat about it and give more unsolicited advice, or I'd be happy to give solicited advice. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if any of this was helpful, but also to follow the journey. In 2 weeks, I have my first ever powerlifting meet. So if you subscribe, you will be updated on the training as we come up to that, and then of course the meet itself. And then I have only 3 weeks left in my 20-week cut. We will go into, and I'll get my DEXA scan, and we'll see how that compared to 20 weeks ago. And then I will have a little bit of time off, and I'll come back and probably pick back up on the cut again, because I think the spoiler of the DEXA scan is not going to be quite as low in the body fat percentage as I'd like to be. I think that there'll be significant change, significant growth and progress, but I think I have more that I want to do. So I'll pick that back up after a vacation in March. So yeah, hopefully this video has been informative and encouraging. If you're in your 20s, don't do what I did. Take advantage of the high testosterone, the muscle building, the recovery, everything that you can do. Carry that with you forward. It's easier to maintain muscle than it is to build muscle. If you kind of wasted your 30s, don't fret. You can still build muscle. You have the same muscle building capacity in your 30s. Recovery might take a little bit longer. You might have to manage injuries. And you have to pay maybe a little bit more attention to stress management and mental health. But it's absolutely doable and super cool. How cool is it that research shows that you can build muscle all the way, they've shown into your 80s. So that's super encouraging. And hopefully that is the takeaway, is that no matter what decade of your life you're in, you can still build muscle, lose fat, get in great shape, feel great. Do the check-in for today. If I can get it pulled up, we weighed in at 183.7 today. So that is great. That's a new low, which is a good thing. I think 184 was the lowest we've been. So we're kind of getting back on track, and really it's probably all thanks to kind of finding a new calorie minimum or maximum. I've kind of reset that. I'll show you what I mean in a second. So we're on track to have a lower average this weekend. This is good news because I really need to be at like 183 by this time next week so that my water cut will be enough to get me to my 82.5 kilograms or 181.8 pounds weigh-in that I need for next Saturday. So let's see. Let me talk about the calories. So I adjusted my target calories to be 1350. So you can see today I've only had 45 calories. So I have 1305 left. With a maximum, I really want my maximum to be 1500 calories because at 1500 calories, that will be a 1000 calorie deficit for me. And if you remember when I started my cut, my TDEE was 2900 and I was doing a deficit of about 18 or 1900 calories. So a 1000 calorie deficit. If you've seen my videos about cutting, you know that 1000 calories is that magic number for 2 pounds of fat loss per week. So I don't think I could sustain 1350 to 1500 calories long term, but for this last week and a half or so, or really 2 weeks, I'm going to shoot for that and try and do like a kind of like a sprint for the end of the cut. Because I've been stalled for a couple of weeks now, and I kind of just want to. We're getting to the end. I'm just losing motivation, but now we're like on that home stretch. Like if you think about a 400-meter dash, we're on that last 100 meters. So it's time to go all out. So I adjusted that calories down so that I could lose the weight, both for my weigh-in and also to try and, get down as low as we can for the end of the cut. That started on Sunday. I started with 1445. Yesterday I thought I was like closer to 1350, but then I remembered I had this bronze bar earlier in the day, and so I added that, which snuck us in just under 1500 for the day. 178 grams of protein, which I think is a pretty good ratio. Anything above 10 grams of protein for 100 calories is good. So at 1500 calories, anything over 150 grams is like, wow, great. So that means that we did a good job on protein. Sodium, I'm shooting for 4,000 to 5,000, and I think we are sitting in that correctly. Shooting for about 150 grams of carbs, and that we hit that as well. And I think like 2 to 3 liters of water, which we'll see. I think I hit that as well. We did that with the bronze bar and the coffee in the morning. A big lunch. I'm finding that I'm hungry at lunchtime. And so just like an apple. I had some egg whites with bell pepper, pico de gallo on it. While I waited, I had a beef stick. I had some yogurt after that. I had some salt on the eggs. I wanted to keep track of the salt. An orange, another bronze bar, caramel rice cake, a handful of goldfish, and another coffee. And then for dinner, just a couple of small bowls of chicken noodle soup, a David bar, and pickles. Throughout the day, I snacked on a caramel rice cake, a couple of sticks of gum, a carrot, and another beef stick. So some more of the same the rest of the week. I grilled up some Italian dressing marinated chicken breasts yesterday. It's been nice this week. The weather has been nice in St. Louis, so I wanted to take advantage of that. I love grilled chicken. For me, that is like a cutting hack, is this easy, just you pour Italian dressing into a bag with chicken breasts, let it marinate overnight, and then you grill it. And it is so tasty, still super low calorie, high protein, but you have to be able to grill. And I don't like grilling when it's cold and snowy, but it's nice out. So I did that yesterday. So between that and the chicken noodle soup, I think that should allow me to get some low calorie, high protein meals this week. I bought some more extra veggies and fruit at the store, trying to set myself up for success to be able to hit that 1350 to 1500 calorie goal while still getting enough protein. So we've got another basically week, because I think I'll do this until next Tuesday, and then I'll bump up my calories slightly while I do my water cut. Still going to be in a deficit, but I'm not going to be in a super deficit like this. So I've got another week of this. Can we do it? Stick around and find out. I mean, not this video. This video is over, but stick around
subscribe to the channel, watch other videos to find out.